but I've never been able to.
You need to try a bit of Ultimate Lightener. Now, imagine all of us. We're all just going to be like all these little blondes flying around.
Well, we might get Jan to. We've also got, so me and Caroline are here. We've also got Jan in here as well. She's currently not on video, but you should be able to hear her.
Hi, everyone. Hello. I'm just the voice over here.
She's our amazing support, and actually later on we'll get her to go on the video because she may have just gone and got her hair blonded with Ultimate Lightener.
Yeah,
I see a picture.
Hair envy.
Oh God. Maybe we'll surprise everyone.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we can get started. I feel like everyone's in here, and that's good. So for you guys that haven't been on Click Meeting before, we can't see you and we can't hear you, which is unfortunate because we would love to see you and hear you. But what we do have is a chat box that's sitting on the right, and a lot of you are using it at the moment. But any questions you have, just write them through the chat box. Me and Caroline, you can see we're both standing. We're actually going to do some demonstrations today. So therefore, we've got Jan helping out with the chat box, and she's also going to ask us any questions that you guys might ask as we keep going along and we're working through the day. Really what our class is today, we wanted to talk about sort of creating the look, and what we mean by that is, when clients come into the salon, they come in with certain images, different ideas of what they want, and sometimes they tell you they want something that's a technique, but really what they're looking for is actually the look. So really it's our job as stylists to diagnose what the look is and what types of techniques we would need to use to actually create the look. So that's what our class is based around today is, specific techniques that you would use to create a complete image or a complete look from your client, and how to really diagnose that with your client. Just a bit of background for those of you I don't know. I'm over here in New York, so I'm the Education Manager for Color Me in North America. I work with a wonderful team over here and have been with the brand for about 6 years. So, I've been many jobs within this brand, within styling, colour, working behind the chair, and part-time educating. And Caroline as well, you've been with the brand for a really long time, right?
Yeah, it's been a while now. I forget. I think it's kind of 8 or 9 years now. But really excited to be here. So I'm here over from UK, so other side of the pond. And yes, I am a Style Master and a Colour Master for Kevin Murphy. So yeah, really excited to be here. This is my first webinar with Jodana, so this is really cool. We kind of feel like we're, doubling up together, double trouble. So it's really nice to be here with you as well, Jo.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's like the Aussie and British invasion over here.
Yeah.
Even though I'm in New York, I'm still Australian. So here we go. So we, some of the things we're going to talk about today. We're just going to touch on consultation because really that's the most important part. And we won't go into how to do a consultation, but things that we do, tools that we can use to help with the consultation. Also how to prepare for your colours. So set up a really clean station, different techniques that you'd utilise to create a look, different lightener choices, because we're most specifically focused on, looks that involve lighteners. But also then we're going to show you 2 different looks that Caroline and I chose, and then we're going to break them down into techniques. And that's what our beautiful mannequins are here for, because we're actually going to show you how to, multi-layer, or how to actually use multiple techniques in one head to create that look your client wants. So that's going to be our day today. So let's get started with consultation. So some of the things, again, with consultation, this is really the most important part, obviously, of any colour service. But I think nowadays when people come in with looks, they might not necessarily want a technique, they want a look, but they have words that they hear because we are in the day and age of, social media, and, there's so much information accessible to our clients. So they come in sometimes wanting things like balayage, balinage, babylage, or whatever it is they want to call it, but they don't actually know what that means. What they know is that they saw a picture of hair that said it was balayage, and that's what they wanted to actually get. So it's really important for us to kind of interpret what our client's saying and really kind of go through and have a look at the different looks and really diagnose what in the image are they actually liking, what is it that they're actually attracted to, and it's really up to us to choose the technique that's going to get them there based on, their hair depth, their hair density, and even is the look really right for them when it comes to their lifestyle and their budget. Are they actually willing to put in the work to maintain their look? There's so many things that have to go into that to really, before we even start actually colouring hair. Some of the things that I really like to use, fringe benefits, if you have them. love them. I think they're a fantastic tool for actually showing your client if that tone is actually going to suit their hair, which is a really great way to show them the difference between maybe a natural, a warm, and a cool blonde. But also using a lot of image boards. So really going through and, I recommend, and, Caroline and I have made some today, but recommend creating different mood boards based on different looks and colour palettes so that your client, you can actually sit with them and you can go through it. You could do this on Pinterest, Plotboard, whatever type of medium that you have. There's so many out there, but I have them all saved and ready so that if I'm having a consultation with my client, I can really start to diagnose what these look like. And, also just really setting up your client as well for those realistic expectations. Some of the mood boards here, I'm just going to flick across 1 second to show you, here's an example of one of like a lived-in blonde. This is to me, these are very similar looks with slightly varying degrees of colour. Different root shadows, different amount of brightness. But really, if someone, who was like myself, came in and was showing these images, this is really up to me to show them something else that's maybe more in my natural depth. So maybe flick to another mood board. Hope it's the right one. That's not the good one. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I've lost that one. Better works. There it is. So I might be better off to flicking to a mood board that maybe is more of a bronze palette, because really realistically for someone with naturally dark hair, that really light blonde is not going to be as achievable, and it's going to be a lot of upkeep. So maybe I want to sway them into something more like this. So this is really that part of consultation where I'm creating different mood boards, for different effects on the hair. And I know Caroline has one here too, so I'm going to flick over there. Sorry, Caroline.
No worries. There we go. Yeah, thank you, Jo. I really agree with everything that you're saying. And I think as colorists in the salon, what gives us the opportunity of really being able to understand the client's needs is to spend so much more time on these things and just not assuming that you're on the same page and not assuming that your gold blonde is the same as what they're imagining when they think of a gold blonde. Again, I just love how you say, Jo, that language of flipping open a magazine and they see the word balayage. And that could be so many different images as well, depending on what magazine you open. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. We guys are probably realizing even more than ever now about communication and how key that is. So for me, I just want to talk you a little bit through my mood board, and I'm just going to pop my cursor on so you can kind of see a little bit closer at what I mean. So for me, if I get lots of these sort of images, you guys probably the same. I think these are very on-brand images and very current at the moment. So I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, so hopefully you can see what I'm pointing to. So just starting from the image in the top right, for me, this is really a great example of talking about more technique. So I would say this is full of baby lights. Someone might say a root shadow, but actually I think there is a bit of a root shadow going on, but also a lot of it is to do with the lighting. Again, underneath and going across a little bit more. So we've still got very soft coloration, but we're starting to see more chunky pieces and different tones coming through the hair as well. So there's some cleaner pieces, but also some really nice caramels, but there's a really nice blend as well. So we still can't really see how and where the color has been applied, but then coming into more kind of chunkier pieces. So especially down here, we've got starting to get a bigger contrast from our base color to our ends as well. So I think actually just even having a conversation with your client, if this was a mood board that your client might bring in, we can actually just put it back on them and say, okay, tell me about this image and what do you like about this image and what is it that you like about this image? So then we can start to kind of take away really the deeper meaning of what they're trying to say. So are they actually after the brightness from one image or the tone, and are they after the blend from another image? Because as soon as we start to assume, we can really, really quickly misunderstand where they're trying to come from. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you definitely never assume, and I think it's like that tried and true, right, when people are looking at an image. It might not necessarily be the hair that they like about the image either. It could be something, if it's too broad an image, it's good to narrow them down to the hair, because sometimes they're liking the whole image. They're liking the skirt, the pants. the makeup, the model, whatever it is. So I think that's really important, and I totally agree, Caroline. You need to really sort of get down to the nitty of what they actually like, and even isolate on images. You know, is it here? Is it this part that you like? Whatever it may be, just to really make sure that you're both on the same page, because it's super important to set you guys up for success, that you're both wanting the same things and you're going to do exactly what they want, so they have a realistic expectation.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, tell us about how you set up your station, Caroline.
Oh, thank you, Jo. Well, that takes you on nicely. So really, before we start any colour service, we really want to make sure that we're actually setting ourselves up for success. So we've already got a really clear understanding of what our client wants, and then we've understood and diagnosed how we're actually going to approach that. So when it comes to mixing up our colour and getting ourselves ready, a really nice, clean environment is absolutely essential, because when we're kind of working in chaos, you have all your clips and things everywhere, you know, we have to be really time efficient in the salon. And if we're forever having to leave our client to mix up more colour, you've run out of clips, or you need a new clean brush, all of this kind of, it looks a bit messy, it feels messy, and then you start to get yourself in more of a panic. So if you're always in control and you have everything ready, you're going to set yourself up for success. So I'll just show you a little bit. I'll just kind of give my laptop a little tilt there so you can see. So just a couple of things that we talk about. Again, everybody has this trolley from IKEA, I think, no matter where you are in the world. I see these everywhere. So I always have an extra bowl ready with my colour not mixed but ready to go. So especially when I'm working with something like Freestyle Lightener, the consistency is like really essential to keep it, you know, the perfect consistency as we're going along. So I really like to have multiple bowls, and as well to make sure that my lift is going to be nice and consistent as well. So I have my colour ready. I have spare clean brushes. So we always like to keep our brushes, even when we're using them, just rested on top of the bowl, because if they actually are left in the bowl, what can happen is they can get kind of further, back to front, the product can get further and further up the brush, and it really starts to expand, and it stops you from having that nice clean application. So that's just a little tip to keep your brushes clean. But also we know sometimes they do get a little bit messy, so just having a couple ready to go will help you for blending as well if you need a dry brush. Plenty of sectioning clips, any tools that you might need like your colour palette, and also just at the other end of my trolley I always have a spare pair of gloves, and I have a couple of towels, either disposable if you use those, or just another towel that you can always keep your hands nice and clean and tidy, and essentially so you're not going to start making a mess anywhere, and you're always in control and clean to go. So Jo, do you want to talk us through about sectioning?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I was just stuck on the mute button there. So, you know, 100% agree with Caroline. I think keeping a neat station, and there's an expression I always have, maybe it's like the Beastie Boys songs, but I'm messy by nature, not naughty by nature. So I tend to be that, like to think I'm some true artist and start flinging things everywhere. So I think that having that neat station is just so, so important. But, you know, I love what Caroline's saying there about, you can see I'm lifting it up here. The one thing I never want to have, never not want to have is a towel hanging off the edge of my trolley or my tray, so that I can actually wipe my hands if I get colour on them. If anyone's worked with me, they know that I always have colour in my hair. So that's why I have the towel, just so I don't touch myself and make a mess, and also to keep it really neat for your client. It's about their experience as well. So the other thing, as well as the clean area, is clean sectioning. You know, it's just really important, I think, especially when working with painting and highlights, so that you get a really even, clean result, that you always have really clean sectioning. Personally, I like to, when I'm working with highlights or painting, I tend to not wrap in a ball, just because for me, if it's been sitting there too long, I find that sometimes I can get creases, and it's mostly, especially with these mannequins, where the porosity is not really great. So often I actually just make a really neat, like rope down here, and I often put a clip in it, so that when she looks in the mirror as well, I mean, she might look, again, it's a lot easier with the hairs thinner to actually use the section clip rather than one of these curl clips, because it looks a lot nicer, and it looks a lot cleaner for her. So sometimes what I do is just actually grab one of my section clips and I just go ahead and just pop that in there, which sometimes you can see from side to side. You know, if I was a client looking in the mirror, mirrors, this side would actually maybe be more pleasant to look at than this side. So I'm always thinking about what they're looking at as well. If you have a colour bar, amazing. They can't see themselves, so you just need to make sure that they look good. But importantly, especially when working with lightener, you need to make sure you're really clean in sections. A classic 4 section, or what do you call this, Caroline?
We call it a hot cross bun.
Hot cross bun.
That's very British.
Yeah, so a hot cross bun section could be really great, you know, just to start out, and then you could go and make all your subsections from there. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think what's great about that, Jo, is it works on any hair texture, whether the hair is very dense and very thick, or if you've got finer hair as well. Once you've worked from those kind of quadrants, you can then break it down as and when you need to. So I really, like 9 times out of 10, that's always how I start my sectioning as well. So we're actually just going to kind of familiarize you guys with a couple of our lightning techniques. So when we use this language, and say V's and W's, for example, some of you may have actually been part of Colour Me classes before. You may have attended some of our other webinars. So we just wanted to familiarize some of you that may not have attended those when we refer to this language, so you know what we're talking about. So the first one is V's and W's. I'm going to be freehanding today, so I'm going to use my Freestyle Lightener and my colour. So again, talking about, like, the word balayage comes around a lot, but we also refer to touche, there's ombre, there's diffusions, there's, like, the list goes on and on. So we wanted to sort of uncomplicate it today. But when we're freehand painting, it kind of, this trend really kind of erupted really quickly across the globe. So I know everybody's attending from all over the place at the moment. And it was something that people weren't familiar with. So it's not necessarily something that I learned at college. And I know in the UK, it was a very kind of quite a new concept, even though it's actually been around for a very long time. So being able to break it down into a method and to actually have method behind the madness, again, it keeps you in control. So a simple VW just allows you to have that pattern and you always know where you're working from. So this technique will give you a very soft coloration. So this isn't necessarily after very, very heavy saturation on the ends, but if you wanted to do them back to back, you could absolutely build up the color that way. So I'm going to work on a diagonal just to demonstrate what we mean by this, and I'll just spin her around so you can see. So with my tail comb, I'm just going to take a really fine slice. So when we take a slice, just make sure, again, I know all our mannequin heads are slightly different, they're not quite the same as our clients, but just make sure that your sections aren't too thick. Especially when you want the colour to penetrate, you want to make sure that the section isn't too thick so that colour can actually push the whole way through. I'm then going to take my lovely colour palette. So I was actually saying to Jo, my favourite part of their colour palette, not only the shape, but I love how it's got, it looks like a koala because it's our Australian roots. Sorry, I just couldn't help but share that. Okay, so by placing your palette right up close to the scalp, we have a beautiful curved edge, so that means it's going to be nice and comfortable for your client. And then because I have a long length of hair, I've got my thumb through the bottom hole and I can actually hold on to those lengths. Then taking my Freestyle Lightener, I'm just going to use a little bit of product to begin with, and I'm just going to apply that just to kind of 2/3 of the way down the hair, and that's going to get it really nice and tight. So then I'm going to work up in a V shape. So I never put my brush too close to the top, because if I was to create, maybe have too much product, I wouldn't have anywhere to blend it to. Whereas if I'm down here, I can always spread my excess product towards the root, and I'm not going to get any kind of blobs or kind of bleeding on the hair as well. So as you can see, the colour of the Freestyle Lightener is really a nice bright white, so you can see really clearly where you're painting. And then I can build that up. I can make a kind of a finer V or a nice chunky V. And then once I've got that, that shape, I can then really saturate the rest of those ends. And I kind of move my brush around, making sure that I'm actually pushing that product all the way into the hair. And by getting rid of any excess product, that means that this is going to dry really beautifully because we have kaolin clay, which means that we can actually lay other hair on top without worrying about transferring any unwanted product. So because this is really nice and blended in, and if I want to soften any edges, I just take the side of my brush and skim over the top. And that is how you would create your V section. So straight on top, I'm going to take a W, and as you guys can imagine, it's again just working from that slice. It feels really quiet here. Hopefully you guys are all good. Please don't forget to ask us questions. So Jan's there if you want to ask us anything. Okay, so taking my slice, I'm going to go in at the same angle this time. Nice and close to the root. And I'm going to do the same, applying my product. And again, I just like to do this for control. So I like to apply my product down here and then working up on the outer edges. But obviously this time I want to make it a W. So all that means is that I'm also going to add a third higher point in the middle section. So once I've got enough product on there, I can make sure anything else is left in and saturate those ends. So even just by when you're, oh, sorry, is that you there, Joe?
Oh, it's me.
Oh, hi, Jan.
But I was waiting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Clarice, I hope I'm saying that correctly. She was just asking how thick are your sections? And then Matthew has a question as well.
Oh, great. So I'm taking, I'd say, actually less than 1 centimetre. So really fine sections. So about as thick as you would take a slice. But I would leave some hair in between. If you want heavier saturation, you can do these V's and W's back to back if you want to apply a lot of colour. But if you want to keep it softer, I tend to go for kind of 1 centimetre or 1.5 centimetre section. And then from that section, I would take my slice and then work from there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you just answered Matthew's question as well in your answer. So you did 2 in 1.
No problem.
Sorry, Caroline. I went away so that you could go on big screen. So.
Oh, no, it's good to see you again, Joe. I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, I was like, I'll go away so that we can see you on big screen. So I don't know if you noticed.
Fantastic. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, perfect. And I think, what ties into well with what Caroline's talking about, like another painting technique as well, oh, sorry guys, is you have to bear our hairdressing technology skills. We'll get there at the end. So the surface painting, is another technique that's a painting technique. You could use surface painting in V and W shapes. So what Caroline just showed you, you could do as a saturation, or you could also do it as a surface paint as well. So surface painting, to me, what it's really good for is you are literally just going ahead and you're just painting the surface of the hair. So why I like to use it is it really gives that very natural, more of that, balayage sun-kissed effect that you're looking for. And if you're doing it into sections, if someone's traditionally had a full head of foils, you could actually use something like surface painting to break up any existing foil lines. And what you could do is, actually go through and they can have a full head surface paint instead, which would actually be a lot quicker. Obviously, that's not ideal for everyone. So if someone's a darker depth, that may not be the choice because, again, we have an open air development, so we're not going to get as light as any time that we'd incubate with a foil. But the benefit of surface painting, again, is when you don't have to leave sections in between, but you can take sections between 1/2 to 1 inch, because what's ideally happening is we're painting on the top and the underneath will be left for that contrast. So when I'm surface painting, I tend to I use the board and I use it a little differently. I always have it flicked out to the side. It's just the easiest way that I like to to hold it. It's just how I am. But again, I always say to people, I hold this very loose. Don't tense up here, because I feel like you'll get RSI. If you clench, it's like anything. You just got to leave your hand nice and loose, so it's almost sitting on your forearm here. And if you have really tiny hands, then maybe you want to hold it a different way. But whatever works for you, I always say with the board, whatever floats your boat, not the fun police, whatever works and makes your job easier. The key is that when you use a tool, it should make your life easier. If it's not making your life easier, then maybe you need to find a different tool, or maybe you need to use it a different way. So I always just go ahead, and really the amount of product, especially when I'm surface painting, it's just the edge of my brush. And I'm very similar to Caroline. I tend to start down lower. I do it for, when I'm working with the board, it's great for control. But when I'm just surface painting, I do it so that if I've got too much product, what I actually can do then is I can move it up from there. If I got too heavy and I went up here and I slipped, then it's really hard for me to remove it or to me to blend it. So I'm just going to gradually work all the way up. And I'm not necessarily going to do a shape. I'm going to hold the hair at 90 degrees so that I get good tension. And you can see I've got tension because I'm pulling the mannequin off its stand. And then I just keep going. And I'm using the flat of my brush. And also I'm using more of a rolling technique. So I'm just slowly laying it on, because if I go in too thick or like in a different angle, I'm going to push through. And the idea of surface painting is literally just paint on the surface. So I'm just going to keep going up. And then I'm just going to feather into the new growth. And then even though I'm not going through, I still want to have a nice saturation. And I want it to be smooth, because that's going to give me the lift. And then I just keep going. And if you wanted to saturate the ends on a surface paint, you could. And you could literally just flick the board around, and you could just paint those ends. And then you'd be done. So that you could do throughout the whole head, especially when you want to create, a very like natural sun-kissed effect. You can go over there, darling. Okay, perfect.
Sorry, I'm not sure where I've taken us, Jo. I was trying to zoom in on.
Hey, I've got you. I've got you. There you go.
Thank you. I really love watching people apply colour. It's so therapeutic, isn't it? Just watching someone else do hair. So I totally got lost in your surface painting then. Okay, so the next technique I'm going to talk to you about is ribbons. So ribbons is, it could actually mean multiple things. Essentially, it could be like a weave, or it could actually just mean taking individual pieces. So this is really good when you actually want to see some really nice definition. And I think it's important to remember that it's actually good to have nice chunky slices or chunky pieces of colour sometimes, because I think when we play it too safe, especially on very dense hair and when we've got a lot of hair, we can actually blend the hair too much, and we've actually lost some of that definition. So I really like actually having the shadow in between and making sure that we have that contrast. It really makes your lighter pieces really pop. So for example, again, I tend always just to work with a really fine slice, just because if I want the colour to penetrate, as Jo was saying, depending on what you want, if you want the colour to penetrate, you need to take a slightly finer slice. But if you're surface painting, you can actually play around with working just on the top. So I'm just going to continue working on my mannequin head. So just working up on a diagonal, but it could be anywhere. And again, I would just take a nice big weave like this, and you can either go straight in with your palette, and this can be nice, kind of an alternative to, a forehead of highlights. Essentially, it's not going to give you the exact same result, because the beauty of using Freestyle Lightnet is that you get a very, very soft edge. So it's really beautiful. You can go very close to the root, but without getting that grown out foil kind of feeling. Or we can actually just say, pick up some individual pieces, and I'm going to take a leap out of Jo's book this time, and I'm going to go straight in, and you can actually apply straight onto the hair. So again, I'm just working with the side of my brush and then just holding that out. So if I was to hold the hair too low, what can happen is my brush is quite a large surface area, and I can maybe start picking up on baby hairs that are around and out of the way. So if I really elevate my section, it makes sure that I can keep everything really clean and make sure I've got all of the colour that I need. If I want to use the back of my hand, I can just seal those ends, and then I can drop that down onto the rest of my section, and I know it's all going to stay nice and neat and tidy, and I've still got clean hands. And then if I need to, I can just wipe the back of my gloves with my tool. So again, still working with clean hands. So have you got another technique there, Jo?
Yeah, hey, let me come in here.
Sorry, one in, one off.
Just flicking, you think every time I'd get it, you think at some point I'd get it right and I'd know exactly which one to flick on, but so the next thing we're going to talk about is face foam and baby lights. I'm actually not going to demo this one because when I actually do my complete look, I'm going to do a lot of baby lights through there. So I'm going to show you that and show you how to do a face frame with baby lights. The other thing on here, though, that we can't really demo on a mannequin because it doesn't apply is actually how to do more of a face frame or more of an elimination of the hairline. This is a really great technique in between services, something you could add on to a haircut. And what it involves really is if we're going around the hairline, oh God, I've got so many baby hairs. So if you wanted to pull out all these baby hairs, you could imagine if I was blonde, what you can do is actually pull them out at the basin. It's almost like a basin balayage. And you can actually go ahead, say, with something like our cream lightener, which is great, and 20 volume, and you can actually pull out those baby hairs and lighten those, and it's going to give you that really soft hairline and illumination, which means it's going to help your balayage or your highlights last a little bit longer. So that's a really great technique that you can use in between surfaces or at the end of your surface when you're at the base and finishing off before you actually refine the hair as well.
Yeah, I really love that one because I think in the past that area is such a tricky situation and people aren't always sure how to approach it because they're the ones that would naturally catch the light. So it's really obvious if you don't do those ones. So I really love that baby lighting technique, especially with our lightning wands. Just helps you pick up the most perfect, imperfect pieces. So the next term I'm going to talk to you about is diffusion. So basically, we're diffusing that line. Now, there's so many different ways of approaching this. Again, so many different ways. So we're just showing you, offering you another way. So backcombing has kind of come into colouring as an option to create that diffusion. But essentially, we want to make sure that we're still being very gentle because it's very easy, again, to get panicked by wanting to blend the hair so much that we really kind of over tease the hair. But essentially, you really don't need to do that. So I'm actually working on a slightly bigger section this time because I'm actually going to get rid of a lot of that hair. So depending on how heavy you want the saturation, depends on your size of section. So again, just continuing on my diagonal just to make life easier. I've made sure that my section is not free to start off with. And then I'm going to take my tail comb and I'm just going to go in a good kind of 4 inches away from the root. And I'm just going to gently once push that to the root. So I'm not really going very heavy, really slow and controlled. And I'm just going to do that one more time. So from about 4 inches or so, and I'm just going to gently push that to the root. So here I would have already created a diffusion, but if I wanted to get rid of this, 1 or 2 combs and it's completely disappeared. Because when we're at the backwash, this is actually how we can create excess damage that we just really don't need to be there. So I'm just going to show you that one more time. So 4 inches or so, and again I've got my section elevated, if you guys can see. Once, and then completely take the comb back out and go back in. And that's all you need to do. And then you're clear to go ahead with your palette again. So I've just given it a little wipe and I'm going to go in and I can just add that saturation on the ends if I need to. So again, I would apply a little bit more this time. And then before I do the very ends, I like to leave that to last. So I'll try and tilt so you guys can see. So just working that product through. And then I just really kind of like to brush the hair upwards, just so I'm never giving a very solid line like this. So I'm never going to create a very harsh line. I've always got room just to really soften that out. And this will be invisible when you go and actually rinse your colour off at the backwash. So just on those ends, I can continue to push that through and make sure they're all nice and tidy together, just so it looks pretty, and I can drop that. So that's what we call diffusion. But we also have faux balayage. So faux balayage foil. So essentially what we mean is that balayage technique, which actually essentially means to sweep. So it kind of means to sweep on the hair. By actually applying it in a foil, it just gives us options if we're trying to really accelerate or not accelerate, sorry, but to make the maximum lightness that we possibly can. If we are putting our colour in a foil, we have the added benefit of that being nice and warm. So we know we need to have a nice consistent warmth if we're working from a dark depth and we want to see some really clean blonde pieces. So essentially you could do any of these techniques, but instead of using your freestyle lightener, you could use one of the powder lighteners or maybe a cream lightener, which is perfect to be used in foils. So you could create a diffusion, you could do your V's or W's, and essentially just making sure that you're not near the root, but you've got that grown out soft coloration, but the benefit of being in a foil allows us to get those really bright pieces as well. So I actually really like that, especially when I want to keep a root shadow. I want to see some nice lighter pieces coming right up to the root area, but I still want to have that depth of shadow. By having my faux balayages in foil, it then gives me the benefit of having those separators, so I can still work really cleanly and then actually colour hair in between as well. So that's, again, it's another option for you if you want to put any of these together.
Awesome, thanks, Caroline. I'm also going to we'll talk a bit about low lighting, but what I thought we'd do is I actually have got a nice little combination of techniques, so I thought we could discuss low lighting when we're working. So we wanted to go through a couple of the looks that we created. So we did a little bit of a cooking show for you here. So Caroline and I have done this morning half a head already, as you can see. On this one, and this one is we wanted to use more of our campaign images. So these are the kind of images that I think clients come in with and really sort of asking you to create this look for them. I picked these two particular images because they're similar but they're different. And I think sometimes what happens to us is clients bring in two pictures and you're like, okay, they're different. So this is where I can really start to diagnose, all right, I've got these two pictures, and what I can see with the picture on the left, our campaign image. So for you guys, let me just pull it into our pointer. So this image over here on the left, you can see to me this is a lot more natural. It's going to have a lot more of maybe a new growth shadow, and there's not as much contrast between the mid-length ends. Whereas the picture on the right here is somewhat similar. It's a little warmer, so I would discuss tone, like what kind of reflect they're looking for. But you can also see in here there's a lot more of a heavier new growth and definitely a lot more contrast that's coming in between these ends here as well. So automatically I know I've got two different looks. They're somewhat similar in technique, but different variations of that. So by looking at those two images, then I know I can go and create my look. Sorry, my nose is, I have to do that with my nose. Does anyone else's ears not pop? But they were just not pop for the last 30 seconds. So I couldn't hear anything, I'm sorry. So technique. So what I actually used in this, again, this type of look, I'm always going to go for something that's in their client's natural fall. The reason I mean by that with their sectioning is because I want it to be able to be somewhat symmetrical on either side so they can flick their hair in between, because this is really a very natural lived-in look. To me, this is a commitment, this look, with a first session. So you might have to commit to me 4 hours, with a cut and a colour, but then after that, it's a very easy maintenance. Like over time, you can create this colour map or this roadmap for this client. And maybe it's, every 6 weeks, maybe things like doing a face frame, doing a zone tone. So really they should only have to get the full colour done every, say, 3 to 6 months, depending on the client. So this can actually be a really great lived-in look for your client. With her as well, what we did, and you can see on this section here, that's our finished look, and I'll show you an image. What you can see here, so what I've actually done, it looks like a lot of work in here. I've actually gone through, so underneath here, I've done a face frame. So I've done that using baby lights. Now you could do baby lights and slices depending on how much colour you wanted to see. Either would work. It just really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And then into this section here, I've worked with the natural fall of the hair, and I've actually done some faux balayage foils and some textured baby light foils in between. And what I'm trying to do is, if you can have a look at the images, there's a lot of variation in tone. Even in this image here, you can see lighter pieces and darker pieces. So to me, that's what I'm trying to do, is create lots of variation in tone by using different lightness. So I'm using Ultimate Lightener and Freestyle Lightener and using different techniques. And then you can see right at the end, I've gone ahead, as I'm working, actually, I did this today, but every second foil, I've gone ahead and diffused all of that hair in between, and I've literally just tipped out the ends. So when I'm having a look at these images, they're quite blonde on the ends, but I just want to make it completely blonde. So by diffusing it, I'm creating more contrast into the hair. So that's how I ended up creating this look. And I'm going to show you on the other side. And then this one here is the finished look, which I'll actually show you an image, because my apartment, as you can tell, is very dark. But yes, so that's what I'm going to be working on for the last part of our class, Caroline. And I'm going to actually just get started on the baby lights really quickly. But Caroline, tell us about your look.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jo. Well, first of all, I really love how you've applied so much colour in one go, because like you say, that could be a really big job. That could be multiple visits. But I like how using the combination of the foils with the tipping out means you can actually get a lot of work done in one go. So I really love that. So I'll just introduce you to my look. So as you guys can probably notice, both the images that myself and Jodana chose were from their North campaign. So we're really lucky enough to share with you the Colour Me campaign, and they tend to have techniques. But with our Kevin Murphy campaign, we thought we'd actually just take inspiration because there's such beautiful images there. So I chose this model because I actually don't work on a lot of dark hair a lot of the time. Lots of my clients really want to be blonde all the time. But actually what I've noticed is that we are actually seeing a lot of darker hair as well, but not necessarily for that kind of overly saturated kind of lighter ends, but just kind of picking up more individual pieces and seeing a lot more colour that at a distance maybe looks like a global application. But actually at a closer look, you can see lots of different depth and tone in there, but it just makes it look really expensive and really classic. So so I kind of approached this look. I found this, this other image, which is a different model. But again, I thought maybe if this was a client bringing in multiple images, it might be part of the same mood board. So kind of how I broke it down was I recognised that there was definitely some kind of more striking pieces in there, and to make sure that they don't actually blend in too much, I think you guys can notice that the lighter pieces are a good kind of 3 or 4 plus shades brighter than the natural depth. So even though it doesn't look too stripy, because it's all to do with actually the sectioning, but if that colour was only 2 shades different, we wouldn't get quite as much definition. So I decided to approach it with a freestyle lightener again. I'm definitely in freestyle lightener mode today. So I decided to break this look down. I'm working with some V&W actual sectioning, but I'm going to be doing some slices, and I'm also doing some ribbons as well. So just really when you want to see those kind of purposeful pieces, by working freehand, it just allows me to kind of recognise where I want my colour to sit. So actually, Jo, I've only got one mannequin here, so sorry about that. Sorry, one tripod. So I'll just sort of talk you through my end result. So I did start on a slightly lighter base, as you can see, but I just wanted to kind of pick up a very, oh, thank you, Jo, a very kind of natural type of technique where you can just see the light kind of bouncing off certain sections. But if I pop her head right down as well, you can't actually see how I've applied that colour. So those chunkier pieces don't feel too chunky at the top, which I think, I don't know about you, Joe, but like definitely in the, like 10 years ago when we were seeing all these big chunky stripes. So staying away from that, they can be left in the past for now, and basically updating it and making it a lot more 2020 and 21. So
wearable, what did we say the other day? A wearable chunky.
Yes, a wearable chunky, somewhere along the lines. So, so as you can see, I have half applied my my colour as well. And don't ever panic, guys, because with your Freestyle Lightener, it's a very bright colour. As you can see, the white from applying it, it's never going to look as striking as this as when you take it out. So don't let that frighten you into thinking that your sections are too striking, because it's actually really forgiving. And I've left a lot of hair in between. So because I didn't want my whole result to be a lot lighter, I actually purposely made sure that I left a lot of space in between, so to really accentuate my lighter pieces. So Joe, do you want to show us what you're doing, or do you want me to get started on my sectioning? How are you getting on?
You can go for it. You get started on your sectioning. I'm literally just going through and putting in my face frame, so I'm sorry that that's actually the wrong way around.
So I have a question for either of you, if you guys have a chance. Do you guys want to take a question right now?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So Jennifer's asking, she has a lot of clients who want balayage, but they need gray coverage as well at a depth of a 5. So how would you approach this to get to color the new growth, and then balayage to get blonde? So what would your approach be?
I was going to say both of us are quiet. Joe, do you want to go on this one, or shall I answer first, and then we can both have a say on it, maybe?
You go for it, and then I'll answer.
Okay, cool. Well, for me, I tend to try and always stay in control. I've really noticed when sometimes if I try and do too many things in one go, I actually just make a real mess, and it actually takes me longer. So, so especially if you wanted to make sure you've covered your regrowth, I would actually go in and do that first, and do my root area first, let that develop, rinse it off, do my finishing measurement, and then go back in and do my detailing with your lightener or whatever you used as your brighter pieces, and then go in and refine. Personally, I find that I actually work a lot quicker when I break it down that way. But I know lots of people are different depending on if you're maybe doing your balayage as kind of your faux balayage foils. You can actually do it both at the same time. So I would say it could depend on the length of the regrowth, how you're bringing up your brighter pieces. Are they actually going to be very close to each other? Because also you need to consider things like when you're clipping your hair out the way, are those ends actually going to sit on that tint that's actually processing on the hair and things like that as well. So I personally like to break it down, but it's completely, if you're a lot more controlled than me, then I say go ahead. What would you say, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's a grey coverage, if she wants to be really blonde, if it's a grey coverage and you're trying to do a lot of lift, then I would even try to put her up into surfaces. Like maybe she comes in to get her new growth touched up, but maybe on the next visit she comes and does the highlights. Because I agree in that sense, it's always great to break it up. If she's someone like that's a depth of a 7 or darker, and you're really just trying to create sun-kissed effects in the hair, then I think it's no problem to do the grey coverage and do, say, some painting and foiling on those ends. I think it gets tricky when they meet. So I guess it depends on that technique. But on brunettes a lot, especially when I'm working with grey coverage, I try to, it's simple for us just do grey coverage, and just do the new growth. But it's like I feel like they need something special. They need something, to liven them up, because they get, we just give them the same global application of colour. So for me, I'd like to do a lot of painting with the new growth on, but it's really just to highlight or sun-kiss the mid-lengths to ends. I'm not going for a big dramatic lift. But if I was going for a dramatic lift, then I would see if I could either do it on the same day as Caroline was saying, or break it up into sessions and say do a new growth and then have her come back in 4 weeks later, maybe for a haircut and her balayage. So that would be part of creating somewhat of a roadmap of colour. I hope that helps.
Do you know what I've really noticed, Joe, is I think how we book our clients in the salon it tends to be a big question for lots of people, especially now after being closed for a long time and actually revisiting the salon and thinking, how can we work kind of smarter, not harder, and work more time efficient? So I've really noticed that kind of either pre-consultations, whether that's over the phone or maybe on someone's visit, talking about when we're booking for your next visit. So always actually planning ahead so you don't have to decide maybe on the day and then have to juggle things around. So I think it's a really good idea to actually always think about it before you've actually booked them in, and then you're not trying to chase yourself and over-promising and then being in the place where you might have to under-deliver in that way. So I think it's great to think about it before, absolutely.
I agree.
Jennifer says that helps. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. You could even do it like it could be that case of you doing a haircut and then new growth every 6 weeks, and then you do their highlights in between that or whatever it may be. But yeah, I agree. I think a pre-consultation is really super important, especially with the changes that people want to have now. They want to have them so dramatically. Mm-hmm. When I say that, I mean they want to go from a depth of a 4 to a 10 in one day. And that's not always the best for their hair. So it's really important to have that pre-consultation. You can set them up for an expectation of what you actually can achieve.
Absolutely.
And you'll have to, I'm just basically going around here. You can see me struggling with that section. These mannequins, I'm trying to keep it super fine, but this mannequins, they have the strongest hairlines ever out of any thing. And it's like, I was like, okay, I've got to get in there, but I didn't want to take too much hair. So if you saw me around there.
I always think when it comes to styling or colouring, if you can do it on a mannequin, a client is super easy compared to a mannequin head. So it's always great to practice. So I might just show you some of the sectioning that I'm doing. So I've just underneath, I'll just spin her back round again so you can see her. Underneath, I just took a big V section and I did a slice on each diagonal. And then I took my section straight across and I did what I called kind of like a shard of colour. So kind of the opposite to my V section, like we were showing before, the V's and W's. So I actually want to create a really strong, striking piece in the middle that actually builds up to more colour on the end. Because going back to my original image, I actually want to see those piecey bits. So I'm going to go from here and then I'm going to actually invert my triangle section. So I'm going to go diagonally up and diagonally down. And then, spin myself around so you guys can see. Because sometimes I know back in the past I've definitely overcomplicated my sectioning when you really don't need to. And I think that's something that I definitely learned through Kevin Murphy and Colour Me, is that keep it super simple, and actually you can get really quick application and quick sectioning with really high impact results. So now I'm working on my my V section. Sorry, my clips are sliding. I'm actually going to take just a slice on this section and a slice here, and then I'm going to invert it again, and I'm basically going to keep alternating that pattern. How are you getting on, Joe?
Good. I've done my last one on the hairline. So a few key things for me. I actually really love these foils. I just ordered a very large amount from, it's called Foil Me, the company, because they're super grippy. So you guys can see I'm able to, how much that grip is like sticking to the hair, but you can also see how saturated I'm making these sections. So I think with baby lights, the important thing around the face frame is the finer your section, so the finer slice of hair, and the more saturation here, the more lift you're going to get. I actually am using, I'm using Ultimate Lightener in 10 volume, and then when I get into this section of the hair, I'm going to use Ultimate Lightener in 20 volume. The reason being that the hairline, traditionally, the hair is really fine, and I'm just always worried about giving girls that, the nice halo around their hairline of little short pieces of hair. So I'm always just very cautious. Sometimes I'd even use 3.5 volume. The reason I'm using Ultimate Lightener is because it's, obviously that up to 9, which is fantastic, and she's a mannequin and she needs help. But also because, for me, it has that bond protection in there as well. So it has that the nourishing capacity to it to actually protect the hair while I'm lifting. So that's why I want to use it on that hairline to make sure that I'm not over lightening her hair. I think that for me personally, I tend to always start at the back and work my way to the front. And that's just because the hairs tend to be thicker at the back, and a lot of my clients are naturally quite dark. In the case of something like this technique, I have to kind of start at the front, because if I was to lay all that over and then try to pull that up, I'd be disturbing that hair. So the way I get around that to not overlift these front pieces is actually to use a lower volume.
Nice. I think using the right product is for the right job is really important, isn't it, Jo? So, depending on your approach, depending on the hair texture, how much what your timeline is, I think having the option, because we have so much choice now for what we're trying to do, using the correct products and the correct method actually really helps you out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your sectioning pattern over there, Caroline.
Oh, thank you. I like to keep things nice and simple. And do you know what? I came up with this more from playing around on my mannequin head. And I actually really like, I'm actually going to start with this one. I actually really like practicing sometimes on mannequin heads before I try it on a client, because especially, I've dropped my comb now, especially what we were talking about before, being able to recognize in a picture when our client brings in an image or multiple images, being able to recognize that looks like freehanding. That looks like a baby light. That was probably used some diffusion in there. Maybe there was back-to-back highlights. The more that we can recognize how that looks on different depths, on different textures, we can then kind of go in our bag of tricks and be able to pull out different techniques as and when we need to. So I think it's really good for recognizing when you need to use different methods personally. So I've definitely had some fun over lockdown. I've been going through mannequin heads quite a lot.
So we just have a question from Oscar for either of you. Have you guys ever tried mixing Ultimate Lightener with Freestyle Lightener?
I actually haven't, but I probably wouldn't personally either. Just because the kaolin clay is what makes this application so fantastic, because I always describe kaolin clay as those, when you put on a face mask and it's really beautiful and moist underneath, but it just dries on the outside. And then when it's perfectly dry, you're kind of ready to take it off. The consistency of Freestyle Lightener is perfect for drying out and for making sure that we can actually just hang those pieces on your natural hair or the hair that's been left out without having to worry about any bleeding or any mess. So personally, I tend to keep my freestyle, my lighteners separate, and I just tend to go for what is the main thing that I need. Is it the fact that I need it for freehand lightening, or is it actually the brightness that I need? So I personally would tend to work like that. What would you say, Jo?
Yeah, I think so too. When lighteners, to me, lighteners I would never mix. We don't recommend mixing any of our lighteners together. They're all different, somewhat technology, and to me, I guess how I feel about lighteners is they're somewhat, they're, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're using them on the hair, you want to make sure you're treating their hair really well. Oh, look, Jan, I did it. This is Jan's little trick from her class. I said, I don't know with this angle if I can do it. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to give it a go. I'm either going to embarrass myself or I'm going to do really good. So I think I'm doing pretty good. And this was a great trick that Dan showed. Just, it does actually make a huge difference in your actual leverage to be able to paint this hair underneath. Oh, sorry, back to the thing. So lighteners, yeah, again, people test things and when we test them, we make sure that it works well. But it's not just about working, performance-wise, but it's also about safety. So I just feel like if I was mixing two lighteners together, as Caroline said, I've got two different technologies mixing together. I just wouldn't know what they were going to do together. And I'd be worried about the predictability. And I'm all about telling you, yes, if you use Ultimate Lightener, it's going to do this. Yes, if you use Freestyle Lightener, it's going to do this. So I think that that's what we're all about as a company, because it's so much, safer and better for you guys behind the chair if you actually have a complete predictable result and you get the performance that you're looking for. Oscar, did that answer your question? That was long. You can tell that I struggle a little bit with talking and working. So that's why I got distracted in the middle there. So I
was going to say, usually hairdressers are kings and queens of multitasking, but I'm presenting at the same time. I think I'm the same as you, Jo.
Yeah, no, sometimes I get a little lost. So you guys can see again, I'm just going ahead and I'm just painting the hairline. There's two things here with this. I'm choosing to do the nape. I tend to do this a lot with longer hair clients if they wear their hair up all the time, because I think it's a really great way for them to, put a ponytail. It's even all the way around. I've heard Jan say this before, and she's like the queen of taking a good selfie, but, quite a lot of people pull their hair to the front, and it gives you that extra pop as well. When I'm folding the foils as well, I'm not pushing into them, so you can see I'm just going through and I'm just putting the foil and making sure not to push that lightener in between. It's really important to me to saturate and then pop that foil down, but not to press onto foil and not to create too many harsh lines, because you end up moving the lightener around in the foil as well. Now, I chose to do foils on this, but you could absolutely do this as a painting technique. The difference to me would be if you want a dramatic lift, like you can see with Dolly over here. Well, actually, you can't see her at all, but here she is. If you want a dramatic lift, then you want to go with foil. If you're looking for a sun-kissed effect, then I would go with painting. So like what Caroline's doing over there. But she's also creating more contrast with the way she's actually applying it.
I think it's nice being able to approach things differently, because sometimes in the salon, obviously we're all desperate to get back, or some of you lucky people may already be back in the salon. And I think we can get a little bit stuck sometimes, or maybe if we've been on a course and learned a new technique that you just love, then you kind of want to do it on everyone, but actually without kind of thinking about what the client really wants or maybe needs. So by having all these different kind of tips and tricks up your sleeve, I really think how great it is that you can kind of, put them together in different combinations to create, the look that you're after. So apologies, I have to, if I keep moving out the way. So just so you guys can see, so my first section underneath, I always start with a big deep V. So essentially, if it was to carry on, it would be a zigzag. And just on these sections, just by taking a slice, I'm not actually doing it on the very hairline, because unlike Jo, who's doing some beautiful face framing and things like that as well, on my look, it wasn't necessarily about brighter pieces right on the hairline, but more kind of just behind and more about seeing those kind of chunkier pieces, let's say, but the nice kind of chunky pieces. So I actually just working on a slice, because that's going to create a fairly heavy saturation depending on how the hair sits. I'm working with the hairline on this section, but as we curl the hair or as the hair moves, it's going to look really nice, straight or curly, which I think is really essential. If we, are only preparing or only colouring the hair without considering the natural fall, as you mentioned, Jo, our clients might not curl their hair every day, or they might not blow dry their hair every day. So we really need to consider kind of what their hair needs are and how they wear their hair day to day for it to make sure it looks great every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So to just break down what I was doing here as well, in between, you can see I was just softly diffusing. Like Caroline was saying before, I'm just gently pushing the hair up. Lucky for me, Emma here, she diffuses really well. So I can just gently push up, but that's exactly the thing, is making it as gentle as possible. I'm about to do some more. I see it more as padding more than anything, so that what happens is when I rinse her, it comes out really seamlessly. The other thing as well, you notice I'm only painting where the hair is not diffused. I think it's really important when you're diffusing not to get any colour into that hair or any lightener into that hair when I'm working with this technique, because otherwise it might create spots or marks. So what I'm doing now, you can see following the shape of the head, I'm just going to keep going This is a common pattern that I use, but I do a lot of lived-in colour. So by following the natural form pattern, you get a lived-in look. So, you can see that hair's going to fall down here. So after the face frame, now I'm actually going to do a faux balayage, like a diffused, or sometimes in America we call it a teasy light. And then the second one, I'm going to do somewhat of a textured weave or a baby light, depending on how I feel. As I work through the head, this hair is going to move further away from the roots because I'm going to be on this angle, but I'm going to pivot to the head. So I'm going to work with the natural shape of the head, but I'm going to pivot and almost end on somewhat of a horizontal. And that's just to keep with the natural flow of the head. And naturally what will happen here, which I want it to happen, is that hair in underneath here won't have as much colour right to the new growth, giving it more of that teardrop or that V shape, so it's very natural looking there. So you guys can kind of see again with those images. Jen, do you think you could click to the presentation? Sorry, Jen. Maybe my images there. Oh, head sheet. That's Caroline's head sheet. We'll send these to you. That one. So you can see again, like maybe on the first look over here, I would probably do less faux balayage and more baby lights or more actual foils, because you can see it's a lot higher up at the new growth, but also there's a lot more surface covered. Whereas if I have a look on here, I'm going to work more on a bit of a teardrop to make sure I've got a bit more of that depth in here. And I personally, find that a lot of the clients I'm doing, this is kind of more of a similar thing. So I think it's just really important. And then obviously what we're going to do is a shadowed new growth and a zone tone with PhD. But the thing is, I actually saw someone write this yesterday and I loved it. Your foil work wants to be really precise and wants to be really beautiful, and it needs to be so that if you didn't zone tone it, it would still look fantastic. Someone wrote, a zone tone's not a band-aid, it's a colour enhancer. And I was like, oh, I love that. Because the work underneath needs to be really good. And then the zone tone or the shadow new growth is really just to enhance it. So that's why I would create that shadow new growth at the end. I can't remember who said that. So whoever she was, I was like, yes, you hit the nail on the head, and now I can't find her again.
Oh, absolutely. I love that phrase because it's so kind of tempting to hide behind things like that, isn't it? And actually just making sure that if you're kind of in control at every step, then you don't need to rely on just kind of hiding behind some clever zone toning. I mean, obviously it's a great addition and like you say, it should enhance, but I really love that. That's a cool phrase.
Yeah, I think it's a great expression. How are you going over there, Caroline?
I'm actually nearly finished because I have a lot of what I would call the hair in between. I would call it kind of like the negative space, if that kind of translates to you guys as well. Because what I've noticed previously in my past, especially when I very much started freehand, doing lots of freehand techniques, is that I felt like I added, so much brightness, that I actually kept having to go back in and re-add that depth. So if you already have a beautiful depth there, just kind of, you can think of that as your low light, or you can think of that as like your negative space. And actually a lot of the time it will just enhance your other work. So you have probably had clients before, I know I've had clients before that just want to be blonder and blonder and brighter, but actually they're at that stage where you think, I shouldn't really take you any further without compromising the integrity of your hair. But sometimes adding depth next to those existing bright pieces then make your brighter pieces look even lighter as well. So I'm kind of working on that theory today, and as well, for me, it makes my work really, really nice and quick. So I've chosen a really nice quick technique today. And again, if you guys want to kind of take inspiration from this, or obviously you can follow the pattern exactly if you like, but essentially this is more just inspiration for you guys. So you could absolutely do 2 slices next to each other if you want fuller pieces. If the hair was more of a denser consistency, I'd really recommend doing multiple slices next to each other, because otherwise you could risk those pieces getting lost. Where the hair's a lot finer, then again you can actually be able to see those slices really nicely a lot easier as well. So just taking some inspiration as well.
So yeah, I'm obviously not going to be finished anytime soon. So we got started heads on a little later, and this was a big look. So that's why I really wanted you guys to see the pre-done. You'll get the idea of what I'm doing, rather than seeing me do this whole thing. And as I said, this is like a big job, but this is like really for that client. When I'm looking at that inspiration image, I'm just going to show you back there again. Here we go. So this can be done. It really depends on what your canvas is, right? My canvas was a completely uncoloured head of hair that was a depth of a 7. So for me, this is quite a lot of work because I have to put all of that blonde in there. But you might get someone that comes in with naturally blonde hair, so you might approach this totally different. You know, because they might come in, they're naturally blonde, or they've been blonded and they want to go back to something more lived in. So you might be working in somewhat of a similar sectioning, but you might be working more with maybe some lowlights and some highlights just to create that contrast. So it really depends on what your client is first. You know, it's going to determine what you're actually going to use. So in my case, I have this big amount of work to do, but literally next time she comes in, I would probably just touch up her face frame. I might do a hair illumination, and then the next visit I might do another zone tone, and I would probably only do this much work every 6 months, just to create all that blonde in there and keep it really lived in. So that's, you know, what we're going through here. So I'm going to do one more section and don't do what I just did, and then we can show you the end looks. And then, because we're a little over, then we can let you guys go on and get back to these days, because I know pretty much most people are open now, except for you, Caroline, right?
Yeah, well, I'm the same as you. I've got just a couple more sections to go, but I've just noticed the time, so I thought I'd kind of come back and wrap up anyway. So as you can see, the finished sectioning is actually on this side, but that I have literally got one section left to do. So as you can see, very, very quick. My final result is just over here. So again, you guys will get a copy of this webinar. So go back, rewind, you can see all our sectioning patterns and everything as well. And I'm sure me and Joe will be posting our little mannequin heads as well, so be able to see those. So yeah, I just kind of really, the main thing that we wanted to get across today is from all of like the amazing Colour.Me education that you guys have seen or seen in your salons or across the webinars. There's so much great information out there. So today was really kind of about how to identify, how to piece that together and how to break it down. And I know so many of you are desperate to actually get out there and are itching to pick up your brushes again as well. So in the UK, it's actually on Saturday. So we've only got a few more days to go. So if anybody's here from UK, good luck. And for anybody out there as well that's getting ready to go back, good luck. I know you'll be fantastic. And again, I'd say as well, Joe, there's so many other previous episodes of Facebook Live and from some of our other resources as well. So if there's a subject that you think you might have missed or that you just want to recap, definitely go to Love Kevin Murphy to check those out as well. And yeah, and just keep an eye out on our social for lots of other events that will be coming up as well. Sorry, Jan, did you have a question?
No, everyone's just loving you guys and thanking you guys, and everything was really great. They got a lot out of it. So
yeah. If you wanted to see here as well, guys, because we anticipated as much, and we can send you guys these head sheets. But these are the final looks here. So you can see Caroline's, which has really got a beautiful amount of contrast. I think it's awesome. And then you can see her formula there as well, which we'll have. And then my little lady, who I'm going to be here for a little while longer. You know, she's come up quite nice and blonde in the end there. So you can see that combination of like a face frame, a faux balayage and a tip out. And then I zone toned her with 800 and 11.2 and yellow. Caroline, do you want to talk them through your formula, what you did there, and then we can let you guys go about your day?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, so as you guys can see here, what I tried to do, you can just see those kind of pieces coming through. I purposely tried not to overtone because I wanted to keep that definition in there as well. So I used my freestyle lightener with 40 vol. Again, because our mannequin heads have been through the mill, we have no idea, you know, how many times I've been coloured previously to get to this stage. So I went in with 40 bold just to make sure that I had the maximum level of lift. And then I actually refined with 20 grams of 8-1 and 2 grams of orange. And I did 5% PhD. So that was the equal to 1 mil. And so that's how I achieved that beautiful shine. And the 8-1 just really took the edge off. So I'm loving PhD. I don't know how many of you guys have tried it so far, but guaranteed you're going to absolutely love it and be reaching for it all the time. So it is a fantastic addition to the Colour Me portfolio. As you guys know, you can do kind of everything with Colour Me, and everything's very intermixable. But because we're doing so many freehand services at the moment, and we're doing a lot of lightening and toning, your PhD service will be a perfect addition to kind of adding that refinement with a no lift and no shift kind of guarantee as well. So you've just got an extra choice. So yeah, thank you, Jo, so much today. It's been so nice to actually work alongside you. I feel really close to you, but unfortunately I'm in, UK, not New York, but
there's just a quick question for you from Jennifer. She's wondering how long you left it on. I'm assuming she's asking about the PhD.
Yes, well, I'll tell you what, I left my freestyle lightener on for 45 minutes and then it had completely dried. And my PhD, I let it develop visually, but I did leave it on for, I think, a full 20 minutes or almost 20 minutes. So yeah, the thing with PhD is, again, like when toning, it's visual, but the longer you leave it on, I tend to like to work kind of giving myself time to actually allow the product to really penetrate, rather than choosing a much stronger pigment and then having to take it off sooner. I like to work a lot more gently, because I feel like the longer it's actually on the hair, the longer it's actually going to be kind of sustainable in the hair as well. So I did actually give it, I think, almost full 20 minutes. So, and then when it was ready, when it was visually ready to come off, I took it off. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, amazing. Perfect. Well, we'll definitely post away. I apologise, my ear is making me a little deaf. It's so weird. And I have a habit that you can't tell I'm saying things out loud that don't need to be said. But as I go on, we'll post some pictures. I'll finish up my girly. Caroline will finish up her girly. But we'll send you guys a recording as well, and any documents that we have, head sheets. And feel free to reach out to Caroline or I if you have any questions. But yeah, thank you, Caroline. Just really, it's been really fun to actually work with someone. I know it's virtually, but it's been super fun. And thank you so much, Jan, for being our moderator and talking for us.
Thank you, Jan. Oh, there she is. There's that.
She's the ultimate golden liner, guys, if you want to see it. But yeah, it's been really good. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for actually, for coming and actually joining us today. We're super pumped every time we get to do this, and yeah, I've had a great time. Caroline, have you had a great time?
Me too. Hopefully we'll be back again. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, and next time you see Jen, you'll be even wonder. So
It will be.
Thank
you guys for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys have a beautiful day and a beautiful week, and stay safe out there and protected as you guys get back into the salon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah, drop.